So this Saturday I was going into my now 4th tournament, but it was my first major tournament. Our tournament was called the Igor Ivanov Memorial Tournament. It was based off a GM that Utah had. Funnily enough, was not homegrown in Utah, but defected from the Soviet Union and lived in Utah. So Utah claims him as their only GM and best chess player. So I played in the under 1100 section, which my FIDE rating going into this tournament was 700. If you won first place in this section, I believe it was an $80 cash prize, it was $20 to enter. And the best person that had of the under 800 section got a cash prize of $45 as well. We go into the first tournament. Each, by the way, all these games are 45 plus 5-second increments, so they're long games, about an hour and a half each. And I go into my first tournament sitting across from a 10-year-old girl, which is like the most terrifying thing when you play a kid in these tournaments, because you don't know whether they're very good or pretty terrible. So I go against this girl. She's white, I'm black in these pieces, and she starts off with e4. I push up to c6. We're going into the Caro-Kann advanced variation, which is where I'm most comfortable in the Caro-Kann defense. I then go for the Botnovic Karl's opening variation. She pushes up with c3, which is very normal that I'll see at this. So I bring my knight up to c6, she brings her knight out, and I bring the bishop out. Everything's going according to plan, and she defends that knight. And so I then further try to put pressure on this d4 square as much as possible. She brings it here, and I bring out the queen over here to b6. Now I'm thinking, after this a4 move, she's looking to kick my queen out, but I think at this point I probably have enough pressure, because you take this off, they go there, take, and you have the queen backing up there, so I have enough. So I take with the pawn, and in the moment I calculated all this, and I was like, oh, I should have taken with the bishop first, because I don't want this to like go off on its own. And then like I thought I completely messed up, because I did the calculations and for some reason I went pawn first. It's the 9 a.m. chess. I'm not used to waking up that early. They take, I then trade off, and then we do all the trades, and everything kind of works out in my favor as much as possible. I then bring out the bishop. She then fortifies this rook on this b2 pawn here, trying to get this bishop out, and I castle, and they go after, I guess, this e6 pawn. So at this point I'm up 4.5 points, which I'm very happy with my performance so far. I bring this knight back looking to attack this pawn here, and she defends it by going to f4. Now I know that these double bishop twins are very dangerous in a later portion of the game, which is where I'm at now, and I do not like where they're at. I wish I was able to have at least one of these bishops, but I bring over this rook over here to kind of get it to the open file as much as possible. But she's starting with his kingside attack to really bring the pressure onto me. I then go and attack the queen. She moves over, and I'm getting kind of worried here. I bring the queen over here to do an exchange, and we exchange queens. So I'm like, good. I'm good with that like threat. We're all great. She goes and attack the horse, and this was my grave error right here. I go to a5 thinking, hey, I'll go here and then look to fork maybe these in the future, but I completely miss the fork here. So this is where now I went from a 4-point swing advantage to now 4.5 points down. I decide to save the knight. The bishop's murdered, and I try to, short my back rank as much as possible, and I deal with the pawn. I snatch this pawn, even though this is coming, and trade off the rooks. I then attack that bishop. They take here, and I'm thinking, which one should I take? I take with the light squared bishop. They push this one back, and I go to attack this pawn, but they had to defend it. And from here, I had a better chance of just pushing this pawn up, but for some reason I thought I needed to get this king over to get this pawn before it's too late. Looking back on the engine though, this was the right move, pushing up to c3, then pushing up to a4 and putting pressure on here because her king's so far away. But I bring this king over, and I realize I can't get anywhere near these two pawns because they're covering these squares. So I realize I mess up. Now these pawns are pretty weak. I then try to save this pawn, but the bishop kind of cuts me out, and then they're able to easily take that pawn. And then she pushes the pawn up and kicks my rook out, and then I have to sacrifice the rook for it. And at this point, I'm just really down bad. So I'm trying my best to get a stalemate as much as possible, but she's gobbling up all my pawns, and she ends up getting me on checkmate after the promotion and moving the queen over here to f7. So my first game, Not the best game, not a good start. I'm very actually upset at this point because I was going into this tournament really thinking I had a good shot of winning this. I go into the second game just being like, I have to go 3-0 from the rest of this point forward to even place in the tournament. Yeah, no, she knew exactly what to do. She was very good. She ended up finishing 4th in the tournament. So like, kudos to her. And she was so intimidating because the whole time that she's playing the board, she's like this, like straight up like intense calculations and using all of her time. I think when we finished the game, she had 9 minutes left on the clock and I had about 30 minutes. Yeah, she used her time a lot better. So we go into round 2. I'm playing this guy who I actually played last week in our tournament where I beat him. So I was feeling confident that maybe I could grab another win. And I start off with E4 and he goes into G6 with like a modern defense opening. So I take the center. I just develop my pieces to the center of the board as much as possible, trying to like control this much as possible, prevent any expansion into the king side. And then he does this A6. I'm thinking he's looking to go B5 here. So I think maybe is the time that, you know, I shut that down, stop any like attacks that he wants to do, because if he brings out B4 after the exchange, I'm up the rook. So he abandons that and he pushes up to C5, trying to create some counterplay. Instead, I say, nah, I'll sit back. Go ahead, take it. I then get this queen on a battery here. He moves the rook over and I just finish my development by getting the rook over to the center here. He then tries to, you know, make some more counterplay in the middle, but I feel very solid with my structure here in the middle. And so I say, let's go on the attack. Let's go bishop H6. He pushes the bishop back, basically leaving this bishop fully parked on this H6 square, which is what I want. I want to get my queen here as soon as possible. So bring the queen out here, trying to figure out any way to get in there at all. He develops this knight. I bring out the knight over here to G5, looking to open up anything. He brings that over. I then take the knight and I take this square. The reason I do that is I'm looking now at check here or here, depending on where this queen moves. He moves it down. I throw the check here. He brings the bishop there. Queen to G7, checkmate. So super easy win in the second round. Very strong, I felt like, performance, and I felt like I did very well. So I'm going into the third round. And I'm about middle of the pack now, so I basically have to play perfect from here on out. I'm playing then this about 12 or 13-year-old boy who is probably my toughest opponent of the match. He goes E4. I then go into the Carl Con advanced variation yet again. So we're in the advanced variation here. I go into the Botanovic Carls. We're very much in the same vein as my first game. I'm very comfortable here. Instead of going to bishop to E2, he goes bishop to E3 for trying to fortify to the center. I continue developing. He brings the bishop out. I bring out the queen to defend that knight. He brings out his queen. I then take the knight there. They trade. And he has a really weak pawn structure here. So I want to exploit that as much as possible. He takes. I then going attacking the bishop. This bishop's also now attacking this pawn. And so he brings that pawn there. And I say, I'm going to castle and just get out of danger. Before I start to launch any sort of attack, that's what I'm going to do. He brings the queen over here to B4 though, and that's a mistake on his part because now I'm able to really like open up the position. I can attack this pawn because he can't take here because of the discovered attack there. He brings the knight over here instead to defend that pawn, and I bring the rook in. After pushing the queen back, I then take the bishop. He then takes with the knight. I just drop the queen back. He brings the other pawn for fortification, and I take this pawn for free with check. He then brings the king over here, and I try to get any sort of attack here, but it's really hard to do because I need to get here, which is going to take a few moves, and I can't go here because of the rooks on the back rank. He takes my A7 pawn, and I say, cool, let's figure out a way to attack as much as possible. He brings the rook in, and for some reason, I don't think, hey, this is a good move. I think the reason is I was going to be trapped if I did that. If I took this, that's why. If I took this rook here, I can't escape. Well, I guess I could get it. I could come back. Okay, never mind. Either way, I don't go to F2. I come over here to D2 instead. You see the evaluation bar swings back over to about even, and he protects checkmate by going knight to E2. The only good move he had. So I take that pawn. I then go attack the queen, and he wants to trade. And I say, great. I'm going to take that because this pawn structure here is not very good. I have a rook on an open file, and I can take these pawns here. And so I know that he's coming over here to A4, but I'm going to try to get these rooks doubled up on this 7th rank. And I'll bring this bishop back to basically deal with this pawn as much as possible. He's then racing this pawn over, and now I'm realizing I might be losing this based on this pass pawn thing if I don't get my get everything together. So I start getting my king over, bring the rook over here to b6, looking to trade off that pawn and getting a rook in the process. He brings the second rook over and I say, great, let's trade. He brings the knight back with the take and I bring this bishop over here. And at this point, I'm just racing my king over, trying to get it here before time runs out. And I'm able to get my king with literally one move to spare. If my king was just one square away, there's no way that I would be able to have a piece up in this exchange. So he brings the knight back and we trade off the rooks. He then comes back all the way to e2 to prevent me from going to d4. But I know from this position, I can just try to I can trade off this piece here. And then this is a pass pawn that's gonna be really easy to get to advance. So he brings the king down and he's pushing h6. I then say, let's trade. We trade off the pieces. He pushes the h5 and I say h6, locking that down. I know that these pieces can't do really anything with my pawn structure. I can just end up going to f4. This king's kind of cut off and I'm able to push this real easy. So as he moves everything, I just move this and he can't stop it. I end up locking him out and he has to take the long way around to get to the end of the structure. I get everything, he takes that. And then from there, I just do the nice little queen king checkmate and win my third game. So I have 2 points after 3 games. I'm now going into last round. I'm ranked 10th place. So I want any shot at ending this in any sort of monetary winnings. I have to win this last game. So we go into the last game here. I'm playing a 6-year-old for this last game. I was probably 6 or 7, probably. And so he starts with e4 and went, hey, look at this. My third Caro-Kann advanced variation of the day. All of them starting in some different way. We go into our Caro-Kann. He takes the c5 pawn right away, which is a little different than my other games. But yeah, I'm basically fighting children on the under 1100 bracket. Most of the teenagers and adults are in the 1500 bracket. So from where I'm at and what my rating is, I'm going to have to play the children. And he goes to attack my bishop. In this, you're supposed to trade off the bishop. The queen comes out and I'm just trying to get castled as quick as possible. I kick the bishop, castle, rook comes out. I move the queen over here to attack this bishop. If this takes, I can bring the knight out. And that's what he does. He then brings the queen over here. I'm looking at doing this fork, but for some reason I can't because this bishop's here. So I bring my rook over. Everything that we've seen with the other games, basically. He brings this out, which I thought was a weird move because it's not going anywhere. And I figure, hey, I'm gonna try to jump in, go here, attack this bishop, open up that fork. So it brings the queen over instead, and I'm able to get that fork on the queen. So I get them. Now that the queen's here though, I still can't get this fork. So I just take this b2 pawn, looking to take this knight. The queen comes over here, looking to defend that, but from here it's cool. I'll do a queen trade and I'm up a piece. So from here, that's it's good for me. He brings this over and I say, hey, I'll shore up my defenses. Doesn't matter to me. He brings that out. I bring the bishop back. I'm now attacking this. He goes to attack my G file and I'm looking to pick up a pawn. And he's trying to do everything he can to save anything. And I missed this fork right here. I'm looking back after, unfortunately. So, but I decided to push up instead. He sees it. He then goes to attack the bishop. I then say, let's trade the rooks and take this pawn. And after he goes there, I bring the bishop back. I know everything's kind of good from here. I'm going to put him in check. That comes back. I take the other pawn. He can take that. That's fine. I'll take this pawn. He comes back here. I bring this bishop and he goes to attack my bishop. And that's game over because I pinned the rook to the king. Take that out. And then I just walk the king over to get the rook and king checkmate. And I finish my 4th tournament and the major tournament up 3 games with 3 points. So my best tournament so far to date. I could have easily gone 4-0. And I finished the tournament in 5th place. So I was very happy. I find out later that apparently I was the #1 under 800 rated player. And so I got a $45 cash prize. So I ended up winning I ended up coming ahead $25 in this tournament. And with all my tournaments combined, I'm now up about $10. So I'll keep posting those quick tournaments. My next major tournament looks like it's going to be in February, early February, right before Valentine's Day. So we'll be doing that video. That video will be here. And we'll see you next time. Goodbye.